the got my instructions here someplace. Want to tell everybody that who might be listening that you can find the budget is on the city's website. I believe it's right on the front homepage if you want to get in and take a look at it and follow along with us. Now I'm going to ask the city manager to take the roll call.
Okay. So, Mike Scott,
I'm here.
Council President Kozlowski. No, she's here. Linda, if you could just unmute and let us know you're here for the record. We'll move on and see Councillor Spegman.
Here.
Councillor Tonjes.
Here.
Councillor Nuttall.
Here.
Dave Dillon.
Here.
Chip Greening.
Here.
Jim Dopp.
Here.
Jim Hickey.
Here.
And then Catherine Stock. She let me know she wouldn't be here, so I believe she is excused. And Linda, for the record, Council President Kozlowski.
Is here.
Thank you.
Do we have all the staff present, Leila? Can we do a roll call of them, or should I just make an announcement of who they are?
You can make an announcement. I think we're still waiting on Scott.
Okay, the staff present for this meeting is the city manager, Leila Alman, assistant city recorder, Ashley Myers, financial specialist, Nina Alillo, public works director, Dan Weitzel, police chief, Eric Harth, and building official, Scott Gebhardt. Anybody that's listening, if you want to make a comment about the budget, raise your hand. And during the appropriate time when we're taking, if public comment is invited. So with that, the first thing we have to do is we have to elect a chair and a vice chair for this year. We wanted to take a nomination from anybody.
This is Jim Hickey. I'd like to nominate Dave Dillon for chair if he is willing.
Dave's
Second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to elect Dave Dillon to be our chair this year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Hey, Dave, you're going to be the chair. Let's get a vice chair going here before I turn the meeting over to you. Anybody like to volunteer to serve as vice chair? Someone want to nominate someone?
I nominate Jim Dopp.
I'll second.
You willing to serve as vice chair, Jim?
I will.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to Jim Dopp will be the vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn the budget meeting over to our elected chair, Dave Dillon. Dave, you've done this before, so I'm going to let you take the floor.
Thank you very much. And first off, I want to say the document list here looks a lot more exciting visually than in years past, as well as wonderful photographs too. So my compliments to the staff that had to work hard to put all this stuff together in addition to all the numbers. So at this time, it would like to receive the budget message. And so Leila, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Dillon, and thank you, members of the Budget Committee and the community. So I was told not to read the budget message word for word, so I'll just kind of go through the high level pieces of the budget message, which is this is my first budget with the city, and I'm thrilled to be here. I've spent a lot of time over this first year in a position like this. You spend a lot of time listening and learning, and now that I've kind of been through the ringer for the first year, I feel ready to kind of bring forward my plan for the next year. So I'm excited to present that to you today. Generally speaking, the general fund is in solid shape. We've had 2 solid years of good returns, record-breaking revenue. And one of the key themes that came out of this effort for me was that while we do have a significant increase in resources over the last 2 years, this is a good opportunity for us to tuck some away. So my proposal includes some of that. The water operating and construction fund, the water operating fund has been sustaining itself pretty well, but very close to the margin. So what that means is that over the last several years, the water operating fund has not been keeping pace with expenses, and that's largely due to increases in costs and other for materials, services, labor, et cetera, have increased over the last 10 years, and water rates have stayed the same. And so that's something that we have to face this year so that we don't run that account into deficit. The construction fund is still in pretty good shape. It's $2.5 million are still in reserve after the Dorcas project. Infrastructure. So one of the things that really came out of my evaluation of the budget was it was going to be a little bit different from past practice. So in the past, when we've had extra resources, those have been allocated to our infrastructure funds, primarily parks, roads, and storm drains. And then most recently into helping pay for some of the debt service on the Underhill Plaza site. So that's something that we will have to discuss. And one of the things that I recommended that we take the next year to look at in terms of prioritizing how we spend resources when we do better than we expect. Debt service. So this budget proposal also does not include an obligation to the general fund for debt service, although I do stand by my previous statement that I believe that we can afford it. I just believe that there's a little bit more work that needs to be done and some more information before we can, I feel confident, obligating the general fund to debt. I did work in a debt service payment into the City Hall fund, should we determine that the resources are there and able to carry that. But I wanted to be sure that I was being consistent in the sense that I didn't allocate any infrastructure or any funds to debt service until we can work through some of those policies, which is the next piece, developing financial policies. I think it's really important that we set financial reserve and debt management policies as a budget committee in a city. Those are really important for someone in my position to have because it guides, it provides transparent guidelines for decision-making, such as whether or not to take debt out. And so I'm used to working in an environment that has more official policies, and it would be my recommendation that we work over the next year to develop a policy framework. And having that policy framework then also allows us the opportunity to update it, which I believe is really important. I do recommend that this year that the budget committee and the city council adopt a reserve policy. So our first policy for the general fund by resolution, and to do that to establish a reserve fund for the general fund. Other things that sort of came out for me in the budget message are foregone revenue. So just looking at our revenue sources with a lot of detail, there's a lot of folks that come through here that we don't tap into. And so our neighbors to the north recently just passed a tax that will actually be paid for by the visitors. And it's just something I think that as we enter into discussions around revenue generation that we should be thinking about. I did want to mention the sort of foregone revenue for a purpose. This was also mentioned in my budget statement. The council has asked me to move forward with a tax abatement program. I wanted to mention it in the budget because we are foregoing property tax revenue, but also to show what kinds of moves that we can make that could actually have some pretty big impact and from a policy perspective. So I think that's actually foregone revenue for a good purpose. And then finally, the budget really focuses on trying to find ways to engage with the community, to really start to get feedback on how we can start to move forward with both policy and regulations and implementing changes in order to make our city more livable. So I really believe that the moves that we've been making with respect to establishing the short-term rental committee and the budget diversification committee, that will start to get at some of these major challenges that we're facing. But I also believe that the city's in a really good position to do that, and that we are really at a critical point, and that we are in a good place to take control of our future, and that to do that, we actually have to make some decisions and to move forward. And so what I believe this budget is really about is setting ourselves up for success, starting to take a longer term look at the future when we're planning for today, and that it's going to take a lot of work and collaboration, and that if we all leave slightly disappointed, then we've done our job. So I really have a lot of faith in this community. I look at this budget and I see a lot of promise. And so I leave you with the message of hope and excitement and wanting to build stuff. So I'm very excited for this year.
When you mentioned caution, or what, maybe that's not the right word, about debt service, we still have to be paying on the land at Underhill Plaza and the visitor center. Those are still in here.
Yes.
Don't want people to think that's blown off or anything.
Correct. Yeah, I should have said new debt. Thank you. No,
Okay.
Good point.
All right. Too many classes in semantics I pick up on.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So does anybody else have any thoughts on the message right now? Anybody in the greater Manzanita audience?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, then at this time, we should just launch into the overview of the individual funds and what the proposals are in here. So, and again, this is nice and complex and writes out a lot of stuff that those of us on the budget committee for a long time just sort of know, but it's good to get to anybody just stepping in can get an idea of what these things are all about. So again, over to you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'll ask can you see my screen question? Does everyone see that okay?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. So exciting. I've been working on this for a month nonstop, and you get to have your undivided attention to talk about the budget. So our agenda, I'm going to just quickly run through some of the highlights for me, in addition to learning my job, the things I've been sort of heavily involved in or engaged with, and just highlighting some of the key things that we've done. And then the departments will do that as well. I organized a presentation to follow along with the budget book. So as Chair Dillon said, some of the stuff's background for you, but I think these should be tools for the community. And so I really tried to design a document that was readable, provided the background so that someone who has never dealt with the city budget could come in and at least kind of know what's going on. Then we'll talk briefly about backgrounds, then budgets, and then really it shouldn't be considered a main section. I shouldn't downplay my own efforts, but I would say the forecast probably should have been done in crayon. I mean, it was a very initial cut just to get folks thinking. So, but I do want that to be a robust discussion, but it's probably one that won't end today and continue on into the future. All right, and so just again, want to thank all the members of the budget committee, and in particular, thanking the folks that helped me put this document together. So Nina Aiello, she's our accounting manager, Eric Harth, our chief of police, Dan Weitzel, our public works director, Scott Gebhardt, our building official, Josh Gandy, who's running the show today. He is also our design services. So Josh really helped with this layout. And then former city manager Jerry Taylor provided a lot of guidance and just information to me. It was just so useful. And then Marnie Johnston, who has been a consultant with us and just providing a little bit of cross-checking. So really grateful to her for her help. We feel really good about this budget. We've missed a few things and we've been making some changes and edits along the way. So thank you for those members of the budget committee that have pointed those things out. I'll highlight, kind of had two things that were left out that I'll highlight, and we've also posted on the city's website. So just real quick, a year in review in terms of administration and council. I spent the last year really working with staff, really trying to help with staff morale, really redefining positions and providing resources to folks and getting folks to where they have what they need to do their jobs and to do them really well. And I feel very good about where the entire team is at. I've been working on the employee policy manual since I got here. We actually have a 95% draft, so we're pretty close. We did a salary survey. We managed through COVID twice. We've upped our game with respect to contract management and practices. We've established procedures for records requests, including charging for them, which we have been doing now because of the amount of time that staff spends on those, and because it's just good practice. We've established predictable agenda notices and meeting materials. When I started, it was sort of hopeful that we got the agenda posted the Friday before the meeting. Now we have specific dates in which we deliver that and have consistently. We did a retreat with council. We've done some good policy work, and this isn't the whole list, but just 1003 and its implementation, which has been on our side of it, and it's been a lot of work. We just did our STR freeze, and now we're working on a workforce housing tax abatement. This is great policy work. Planning and development services, been working with this team for some time, establishing predictable processes for land use review and applications. We didn't really have that when I got here, as well as internal managing of applications. So this is all the stuff that happens behind the scenes that folks may not see, but we feel internally, and we have really leveled that game up. And Scott's been a big part of that. We started doing pre-apps, and we actually have a meeting. We invite the fire department. And so we've gotten real professional about it. And I'm just really happy about where we are today for when I first got here. We did our first annexation in a very long time. We've had a number of commercial land use applications, and they keep getting more complicated. Lots of residential permitting. We've been really working hard on the tree permits and doing things like requiring arborist reports now, and we're starting to work towards maybe some code updates. We've had historically high building starts, and then we've had so many inspections, both building and then the short-term rental inspections have just been off the hook. I've done a lot of work on City Hall, so much work on City Hall. I won't even read through the whole list, but there's old City Hall, new City Hall, temporary City Hall, and Underhill. So lots and lots of pieces that have been done over the last year. This would normally constitute someone's full-time job, which was my old job before I came here. So just a ton has been done on this too. And so I'm just really happy with a lot of the accomplishments that we've made. I've already gone through the budget message and kind of where we're at now that I really feel like I'm coming into my own in this position. I need an image, apparently. What's the budget for? Sorry, forgot that. It's the principal policy and management tool for the city's administration, and it defines our work program for the coming year. So this is what I use to hold my teams to account and to myself. And this is what we use to implement, both provide services and implement new policy. Just for those who aren't familiar, we operate in a council manager form of government. So that means Manzanita voters are really the folks that tell us what to do because they elect the mayor and the city council. The mayor and the city council appoint me, the city manager, and then the city manager through the department heads and staff carry out policies. And this is how we're organized. Again, Community of Manzanita is overseeing a lot of what we do. The mayor and city council oversee me. They also appoint the judge and the city attorney. And then I oversee the public works department, public safety, development services, and then all the administrative staff. And then I work on as well. We now have TCBA running it for the moment, but I interact with them to run the visitor center. So this is our organizational structure. The primary policies that will be implemented through this budget are related to the council goals. And just to remind folks of what those are. So it's level up Manzanita. That's really about advancing the city's internal organizational capacity, establishing systems for managing records. With Ashley Myers on the team, that's already starting to happen. And I can't tell you how happy that makes me. She's doing a great job. And then also really about greater financial transparency and accountability through the use of new financial software. So that big transition that Nina's been working on. We are working on developing internal systems and policies to enhance our internal financial controls and to get us to greater separation of duties. This has been something that's come up in our audits, at least the past 5 that I've read. And that's something with our new system. And because all the other admin staff have their own modules to the system, we'll be able to start separating out those responsibilities more, which is really great. So those are just examples of the types of things that some of the resources that we are proposing will be used for. Budget Forward Manzanita. This is our initiative to find new sources of revenue and reduce reliance on the TLT, the transient lodging tax. I believe that means we also got to find new revenue to fund infrastructure and utilities because we've primarily been relying on the general fund for those. And then also establishing financial policies for revenue reserves and debt service. So again, that framework, I'm hoping to work with the budget committee and council over the next year to develop those policies. And then finally, Envision Manzanita. So that's developing a vision for growth to inform the development of a comp plan update and addressing livability issues like the short-term rentals that are businesses that are happening in our neighborhoods. So just again, for folks to understand kind of how the budget is used, just this describes that. We have the actuals from 3 and 2 years ago, and then last year's adopted budget. In the columns on the left side, columns 5 and 6 are the staff and the proposed budget for this current year. Our budget schedule, we're halfway through. You're receiving the proposed budget today, and then we have one more meeting if we need it tomorrow. We will have a public hearing on May 18th, and then City Council will meet on June 15th to adopt the budget. Okay, here's our funds, lots and lots of funds. They're color coded to try not to confuse you, but to help make things clear. So general fund funds these departments. The enterprise funds are the water operating and water construction departments. Special funds constitute all of these funds. Capital projects are all these funds, and reserve funds are all these funds. If you see a light color around it, it means that fund gets money from this fund. So the road fund, it's its own fund, but it gets lots of money from the general fund. Same is true for parks, storm drains, city hall, and public safety. So I wanted to be able to kind of tie those together because there's a lot of interconnectedness that wasn't even obvious to me until I really started to dive into the budget. The Public Works Reserve Fund, obviously resources are coming from the Public Works, from the enterprise funds. And then the Building Reserve Fund, those funds are coming from the Building Fund. So I've asked the department heads to talk about these within their own departments. So that's how our funds are structured. So let's get on with it. On to the budget. Just to kind of remind folks that Manzanita property owners have one of the lowest local property tax rates in the state of Oregon. And why does this matter? Because that is one of the main sources of funding for most general funds. And we are kind of sandwiched in between measures 5 and 50. And we got put into a pretty tough situation because of that. So the general fund, the fund that funds most funds and departments. General fund funds administration, public safety, a portion of planning and development services, court, parks, non-department funds, which includes emergency management, and lots of infrastructure. So Civic Improvement Fund, which is a department within the general fund, but is actually a pass-through fund for the road fund primarily. But it is meant for all kinds of civic improvements. You all are probably much more well aware of that than I am. But those funds, we actually have other funds we can use for those types of improvements. Nonetheless, we have restricted resources. So the business funds and a portion of the short-term rental license fees get restricted to this fund. And so I'd be curious to get some feedback on whether or not we need to continue to do that. Because to me, that's a policy choice that we're funding infrastructure if we continue to keep that, and that's fine. I just want to be clear about it. And the Public Safety Reserve Fund is also funded through the general fund and the City Hall Expansion Fund. We have been paying the debt service out of there. We will likely need to. And then the storm drain facilities, parks facilities, and roads funds all get money from the general fund. So this comes up every time, so I just thought I'd hit it off the bat. What is TLT and how is it divided up? So TLT is the transient lodging tax. It's 9% on the total retail price of a stay. Of that 9%, 7% goes into the general fund. On the remaining 2%, 70% goes into the tourism promotion fund, 30% goes into the general fund. The FY21 figures show you how it breaks down. It's usually around 15.4%. The tourism promotion fund, that breakdown stays about that same. The TLT represented historically about 50% of the city's annual revenue. Last year it was 65, and that's because we got so much more than we expected. And I expect that that proportion will stay the same since most of our other revenue sources are flat or going down. So just to give you a sense of the average growth over the last 5 years in TLT for us has been 15%. 19 and 20 is skewed because we were closed for a little while, but we still brought in more than previous years. This is just a picture of our annual revenue. So this doesn't include carryover. That big drop you see, the light blue line, is budgeted annual revenue. That was to reflect concern about what the pandemic was going to bring. It clearly had the opposite effect. But this is just showing you kind of where our annual revenue is. And just to give you a sense, most of everything else is sort of staying the same. So property taxes are staying pretty the same. This shows you sort of a breakdown of revenue over the last 5 years. As you can see, most of the, the only things that have really increased are room tax collections, the carryover balance, but like property taxes, these remain the same. Others remain the same. Revenue from other agencies remain the same. These are transfers. We started doing transfers in 2021, I think 1920, to do in lieu of the way that salaries had been allocated in the past. I'm not super familiar with it, but we're using an indirect cost methodology now, and so that's what that number is. And the transfers. So what transfers are, just to clarify, because I know there's some people out there in the community that don't understand what this means, but transfers occur when revenues are transferred between funds. And that means that the revenue that's going from one fund to another is that there's providing an internal service for that fund, receiving the service where the cost of the service is shown as an expense. So at the pre-budget meeting too, we had Martin Chaw from FCS come and talk with you in detail about the indirect cost methodology. And that was an opportunity for you guys to provide your feedback and input on that. And that's the method that we use to determine these transfers. I'll be recommending one from the water operating fund, which is what we've done in the past. I'm also recommending one this year for the water construction fund because we will have an active project, and that is going to require a significant amount of administrative overhead, and it is totally appropriate for that transfer to occur in order to cover those administrative overhead costs that would otherwise be basically eaten up by the general fund. And then the building fund, because we've established a new building fund this year, and I'll talk about that in a moment, will also I'm also recommending a transfer for the same reason I would do it for water, which is that we provide services to the building department. It is separate fund now, and they have separate resources. And so a transfer is appropriate for that. Why not the others? Well, the others are funded by the general fund for the most part. And so it's sort of like kind of no point. If they were funded by other funds, then we would. So the beginning fund balance for this fiscal year was a great deal higher than we thought. And I appreciate that we had a very low estimate for last year, but it made me have to go back and check my math a couple times because it was off by about $500,000. Well, that's because we estimated about $500,000 less than we thought we would get. So we did pretty good last year. And I'm estimating we're going to be in pretty good shape at the end of this year based on the current receipts that we have for TLT. So I'm estimating, and I didn't cut this down very much. I made the estimate because working with Jerry, the carryover balance has actually been pretty close to what the estimate is. So I stuck with that for this budget as well. I do want you to note prior to COVID that number and that fund was going down. And I think that that's something that we should be really mindful of, because what that's showing to me is that we were starting to eat into our savings. When you start to see that trend, and that's 2 years going down, that should be telling us something. So with that, I'm going to jump into just the revenue. I assumed, I think 1.1 million for the room tax collections. I got some questions about this. We had seen about an average of 15% growth over the last 5 years. So looking at that, if you start with kind of where our actuals were in fiscal year 19-20, what they would have been if we had only grown 15%, where we would be today. So that's how I made that estimate. And I'm using 7.5% as we project into the future. It's just totally a best estimate. And it's assuming that we probably will see some leveling off of folks coming to visit because folks are able to travel more widely now, but we haven't seen any major decline. I just don't want us to assume that we're going to maintain this level until we've seen it for a couple of years past the pandemic. The other estimates were based on just sort of the League of Oregon Cities guidelines and other estimates for that, but the big one is the room tax collections. And then you can see the transfers in the last part of the resources page, and then the total general fund resources. Now, Chair Dillon, do you want me to pause at the end of this, or do you want me to just barrel through the whole thing and then we take questions at the end? Oh, I think you're muted, sir.
I think particularly on resources, we should take any questions people have about that, because that's always a critical issue. What money and where we get it from and how much we get. So
Great.
Do we have any questions about this massive numbers here under resources? I do
This is
remember.
Jeff. I submitted some questions previously, which I copied to all of you. So I'm kind of assuming that the city manager will respond to those, or what should I assume?
See your questions, Jim.
Well, okay, let me just make sure let's look at it now. That I asked about the intergovernmental agreements. What you just talked about, overhead, transfers for overhead. Was the charge out rate for those intergovernmental agreements, did it include the overhead overhead?
Which IGAs are you referring to?
I'm referring to the Halem, Wheeler, and the Park.
Oh, okay, yes. And the chief actually has a slide about that specifically.
Okay. The other thing I asked about fines and forfeitures, I was kind of surprised to see a 50% drop. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yes, and the chief will cover that in his presentation as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say when we were suddenly faced with the pandemic, we just did a big dial back on, we had no idea what was going to happen. I don't remember the percentage we dialed it back down to. And then what was it, 25, 35%, something like that. And then as soon as people figured out how they could visit and the rental agencies figured out how they could keep things clean, boom, people were back again. So, but it was a good defensive move on our part as the budget committee to just turn down the dial, expect the worst. So that big drop off that's coming back up, that's a good thing.
Mhm.
I've got a basic question.
Please.
I think I ask this every year and there probably is never going to be an answer. Maybe that's the whole intent at the state level. The marijuana taxes, which are not supposed to be identified as a dollar amount by state law, I mean, where are they? Are they buried into the liquor tax? I'm just curious where this unspecified amount of money is. And apparently we will never be able to specify how much it is.
Where did we check that? I think we just underestimate it.
Oh, estimated. Okay.
Yeah, so we underestimate it.
Okay.
I thought one of the issues was the marijuana tax on, we've got one marijuana store in town. Does that come to us automatically, or does it all go back to the state and then come back like a portion of it?
I believe it gets remitted from the state. Nina, is that right?
That is correct. And
Yeah.
you're also correct on the underestimation of that revenue in the budget.
Yeah. And I think one other issue was that if we had a particular number that we were getting in based on the marijuana we were selling in town, you could sort of reverse engineer that and find out how much money this particular store was making. And maybe that's not a problem when you go to Seaside where you got marijuana stores all over the place. But as I understand, when this issue first came up, I thought that was the thing. Why do we really need to know how much this particular store is making?
Well, part of the deal at the very beginning, if you remember, Dave, we only have one store. They don't want us to know that. And we elected to let the state collect the local option tax because we only had one. If we were Seaside and had 8 of them, maybe we'd collect it ourselves, but we don't. And I think we pay a small fee to the state for them to do the collection for us. But it's a number that's buried in there, and at least unless the state changes the law, we're never going to know what it is. So
We don't want it to go away. Every bid counts.
Anybody else have any thoughts or questions or concerns about the resources pages?
Yeah, I just wanted Layla to just briefly touch again on the new reserve fund. So that's something we haven't done in the past, obviously. Is that general practice throughout Oregon? A lot of cities have a reserve fund.
Yes, all the cities I've worked in have. I think probably small towns have a harder time setting them because they typically kind of, ride the margin. We don't have that problem this year.
And I'm guessing, I think most folks would see that as a smart move, good thing, and probably assume it's sort of like a rainy day fund. Are there other expectations for how that money would be?
No, the way I would describe it, Counselor Spegman, is it's like if you're privileged enough to have 3 to 6 months of savings in your own personal savings account, it's to be there in case you lose your job or something happens. So it's just there. We just know it's there, so that we just always have a solid backup in the event something catastrophic happens, or we start to see a downturn in the economy, there's a war, there's something. It's just good, I think, public finance, just to have a solid reserve fund, because it just gives you that comfort and cushion to know that if something bad happens, you're going to be okay. And I think it's also a good tool for making decisions about things like, should we take on additional debt service? You know, having enough money in savings to carry ourselves in the event of some sort of unknown effect and carry debt service, to me, is a lot stronger of an argument. So yes, it's a rainy day fund. It's kind of intended to just sort of sit there, and hopefully we never touch it.
And in the work that you've done reviewing prior budgets and getting into this first budget cycle for yourself, are you aware of any circumstances in the past where the absence of a reserve sort of caught us, or? Okay.
Not in my review, no. I think because the city did a fine job underestimating revenue, that there was always a positive. But when you do look at the last few years, that gap starts to shrink. And so that's where I feel like when a city starts to grow, services start to go up, costs start to go up. So I think we're at a maturity level that taking that approach moving forward didn't feel super comfortable to me, because we're growing.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
This is Chip. I'm on that subject, as long as we brought it up. Personally, I think it's a great idea to have a reserve fund. The level of it is, for lack of any other yardstick, 25% sounds like a good starting point. However, I am still confused about the 170,000 reserve that's on the second line up there below the carryover balance. You said in an email response, which I think everybody got, that it is, you changed it to restricted. These are the restricted civic improvement funds. Is that related to the civic improvement fund? Because it happens to be exactly the same number, meaning the civic improvement fund as part of the general fund, I think that's part of the general fund. Yes, on page 39 has 170,000. I mean, and so is that where the 170,000 went? It went over to Fund 10, Department 140?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I apologize for that. I can see why that's confusing. So it should be the carryover balance is non-restricted and then restricted funds. And so the audit report includes, I think it's 118,000 and some change. Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, of restricted civic improvement funds. And so those are the funds I mentioned. That's the portion of the the business license and the short-term rental license fees that were by resolution set aside into what we call, and it's confusing and it was driving me nuts, it's actually the Civic Reserve, Civic Improvement Department. It's not a fund, but
right.
the resources are restricted. And so that 170 reflects the 118 and some change from the audit, and the 52 and some change that we've already received this year that would go into that restricted fund. So that 170,000 is actually just general fund that's been restricted to this particular department.
I see. So looking at that, since you're talking about it, I'm confessed to more confusion. This is page 39 for those who are trying to follow along. Can I trace, looking at page 27, can I trace the adopted 21-22 budget 82,911 to that same fund. I can't seem to trace it, or I'm trying to find a relationship between that line, the carryover balance, and the Civic Improvement Reserve, which is part of the general fund.
What 82, I don't,
So there's on that line of the 170, there was 82,911 adopted for fiscal 21-22.
oh,
So
yeah.
where's that? I mean,
I don't know. I met with Jerry about this one. We struggled with that a little bit. So I just went with what's in the audit. So I'm sorry, I don't know where that number came from last year. It might have been his best guess because he had a worksheet he had been working off of for years. And that was actually a source of confusion. We spent quite a bit of time looking through. So when in doubt, I go to the actual information. And so I use the audit.
okay, so that's the June 30, 21 audit,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
because that's the only audit we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so going again to page 39, I'm sorry, I just confessed to confusion. What professional services are we using for basically a restricted fund or reserve? So you got professional services to 25,000, and it looks like this is a fund which was used to hand out infrastructure money.
Yeah.
Park replacement equipment, road fund. So what's the purpose of this fund going forward?
That's my
Admitted to
question. You tell me.
Yeah, is this the one you have proposed to get rid of?
Well,
Or
I
is
had
that-
two in mind, but this is one.
And where would all of these accounts then go? Would they be rolled over into other funds, such as if there's a fund for capital improvements, for example?
Yeah, I think the council would, if they wanted to, if we elect to close the fund, we would need to determine where the resources go.
Can I jump in here with a little history on this as I see it? When this was put into place, Chip, it was a smaller amount of money. And if you look at the description in the budget on page 38, it was for buying holiday lights for Lanita and odds and civic improvements, keeping the park up to date and so forth. It was a smaller amount of money that we dipped in periodically for those purposes. And as revenues have grown over time, now it's become a large amount of money for a small purpose. And it's something the council's probably going to have to, with Layla's direction, take a look at and maybe change it around. I think it's probably outlived its purpose.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it seems a little strange that you would transfer funds from one department within the general fund to another department in a general fund for the purpose of then transferring it out of there to another fund entirely, the road fund or the parking equipment replacement. And that's why, I certainly hope.
That's why we got to take a look at it. And I think it's an outdated thing.
Okay.
So it's being carried forward where it says reserve on the balance sheet or restricted, whatever, because based on the policy that the council put in place a long time ago, a certain amount of money goes into this thing and it's restricted for this use. And that's why it's carried as a separate number instead of into to the non-restricted amounts. This little bit of money, it used to be a little bit of money. $170,000 is a lot of money. And it's anyway, something we have to look at.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk a little more about that when we get to the Civic Reserve budget. But thank you. It's a great point, and I agree.
Well, what's strange about it is that I've been on the budget committee for a couple of years. I really paid no attention to it until now. And you wonder almost why it was hiding.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Well, it was a smaller amount of money and it was easy to overlook. When it jumped to 170,000, it jumps right out at you.
Well, should I keep going? Or do any other questions about the revenue side?
Haven't heard none. Carry on, please.
All right, thank you. Okay, so just to introduce you quickly to the administration department, that is headed up by me. Nina is our accounting manager, Ashley Myers, the assistant city recorder, Judy Wilson, short-term rental program manager. And just so you're not confused, Judy is reporting to Scott now, but she is funded through the administration department. And then we have a 0.6 FTE unfilled. And I did get a question about that position and what I expected that to be. My thinking is that position will be a front desk person when we actually have a home, city hall, where people can come and see us in person when they want. So that's sort of at this point, but I don't plan to fill that position anytime soon until, because we don't have any space for anybody. We could certainly use it, but we just don't have space. So what we do is we, at the city manager's office, so I would say everything in the kitchen sink comes through here. City recorder's office, that's us too. We do all the finance and budgeting. I manage all the human resources. We do payroll, the short-term rental program. We provide IT. We do all the community outreach and engagement. We are the elections people, events, committee management, and the list goes on. So the administration kind of covers everything, does everything. We work with everyone, and I just have a rad team. I wanted to get a picture, but I didn't. Dan beat me. Just to give you guys an overall sense of what the impact was of the salary schedule in the COLA. These are by fund, so please I don't want you to get confused, but FTEs they're by department, but by fund. So the general fund actually funds 8.7 FTEs. That includes all the admin, all of the police officers and our chief, and then 0.2 of the building official and 0.5 of the permit tech. The total impact on the general fund for those increases and so forth was $67,000. The building fund, obviously, much bigger increase. That covers 0.8 of Scott's FTE and 0.5 of it's the permit tech of his planning permit tech position. The TLT fund took on a 0.7 FTE. So again, another question, this is the 0.6 FTE from Public Works that we moved up from a 0.5, and then the 0.1 kind of represents the estimate of all the other utility workers' time to do those services. The water fund funds 3 FTE, and then we were able to reduce some of the road fund costs because the TLT, we were paying for that. A lot of those funds were coming out of the TLT that should have been coming out of TLT were coming out of the road fund. That's 1.9. The overall impact was $261,000 on the budget. So staff won't be going through their personnel budgets. I set those were my responsibility, but I thought this was helpful for me as I was going through and looking at what the impacts were on the overall budgets. And I was really pleased. So expenditures, and I'm sorry, this should actually say 4.6, and I made the correction. I have a working document that I'm editing, and I will post a new version of this once we get through these meetings. The main changes here are planning and zoning, professional services, and dues and subscriptions. So the planning and zoning number went up because we do review of commercial applications. So that's when Walt Wendowski comes in and he does that work for us. We are recovering that through fees, but we actually need a line item in here to account for that. So it was quite a bit more this year. And so this is the estimate I have based on what we're projecting to come through next year. The dues and subscriptions accounts for actual costs for financial services. So you can see the last year, fiscal year 2021, the costs were about $25,000. We're tracking close to that for this year as well. So we also underestimated last year. This accounts for our new financial software. A lot of the information technology costs are accounted for here in terms of dues and subscriptions. So Nina and I went through and we looked at, I should say Nina went through and she put together a list of all of the different costs we have. And so we have I think this is just a much better estimate, and it's actually what we're paying. And you had to do, and we'll have to do one this year too, but we had to do a transfer last year from contingency to cover that overage, and we will have to do it again this year. So I say, let's just budget for it because we're paying for it. And these are resources, I think, that have actually created a great deal more efficiency for our staff and creating way more organization. And at some point, it'll make our reporting a lot easier. The professional services, this is the biggest jump. I would argue that I think that the last year's was a little underestimated too, because we were not accounting for IT costs. We actually have to hire an IT consultant. That's Josh. He does everything from sort of the back of house help desk stuff to running security for us to doing all of our council meetings. And that costs us money. And so we're negotiating a contract with Josh, but that's included in here, as well as what I think is an accurate reflection of what legal costs should be. We spent more in legal costs this year than I think any of us anticipated. And this just assumes not as much as last year, but certainly that we will be spending some legal resources. And then these are consultant fees that I put in here related to leveling us up. So those are having, working on getting our systems in place and getting the training we need to do that. The revenue diversification study that we're working with an economic consultant with. I have a number of community outreach efforts in mind that I would like to initiate to start working towards a vision. And then we have a number of policy and ordinance updates that we've been working on. So some of those, for example, are the potential moratorium on dune grading. We've been talking about some housekeeping code amendments in terms of trees and some other things that we think we could do in pretty short order. So those resources are set aside for that, and that is for goal implementation. And I'll be reporting back to council on progress related to those goals throughout the year. So I'll stop there because that's administration and see if there are any questions. Does that work?
I imagined IT was going to be responsible for a lot of those jump in professional services because we had to learn to operate remotely. And now with all this having to operate remotely, we've got more powerful software approaches, opportunities. So thank you for bringing up the 300,000 there. It's like, yikes.
Yeah.
Layla, you and I have talked about the professional services issue before, and I appreciate both the need for this level of expense and also having it in one lump sum in the budget. But on an ongoing basis, is there a way to sort of keep us appraised of how those professional services are breaking out so that you wouldn't want someone to look at the budget and assume that, wow, we're paying a whole lot for our city attorney. Obviously we are, but that's a lot of other stuff in there too. So I think you had told me that there was a way, at least internally, outside of the budget, to internally keep track of the different expenditures within that line item. Is that something you can do for us on a regular basis?
Certainly. And it's something I can work with Nina on too, so we can assign project codes. And so we can have one, and I won't try to pretend like I know that in detail, but I'll work with Nina on finding ways that we can get that allocated to project codes so that when you get the monthly reports, you're able to track that. And the other thing I will be doing, as we discussed, is I'll be giving quarterly updates as well on the council goals, and I can talk about specifically what contracts are related to that. But I'll be happy to do that. One thing I feel like I already overdid it a little on the budget, but one of the things I'd like to do next year is actually have some metrics and to be able to come back and report back to the budget committee on what was accomplished related to that. So I would say next year, right, I should be telling you what we accomplished with that money. So that's something that's on my mind. I had to kind of stop myself at some point, but I do hope to have that kind of feedback loop, and I'll be glad to give that information.
And in addition to the 300,000 here, I know that there are other much smaller professional services amounts sprinkled throughout the rest of the budget. Not a lot, but do you have any sense of the overall total?
I don't.
Okay, well,
I might be able to look at it by general fund. Hang on, I can. Too many screens going here. Bear with me. Oh, I don't, because I have it broken out by M&S.
all right,
Sorry, I can look that up for you though.
okay.
Do we have any other questions regarding this particular page? Okay,
Okay.
next,
On to the
please.
next. Sweet. All right, the non-department, the department that has the most money, interestingly. So key points here. Emergency preparedness is in this budget. The $58,000 is accounts for, so we spent about, I think, 5 to 10 last year. So this represents 60,000 of the 400,000 commitment that was made, adding 10,000 every year. Some was spent, so that's why it's a little bit lower than 60. This also includes some resources too for Dan to get more mobile equipment as well. And then $2,800, which used to reside in PD's budget, was moved over here to account for the EBC NB donation. So that fund is whole. Linda, nothing, and it even has a little bit more in there for some of the work that Dan's been working on. We put the COVID relief funds in there. Nina's been working on getting our last allocation. I believe we'll have that before the end of the fiscal year. We have not talked about it as a council or community. So we will have a discussion about that early in the fiscal year to determine what those funds should be used for, because they're restricted to certain things. The public safety reserve probably needs to go up next year due to inflation and increasing costs. It stayed the same this year, but something Eric and I are talking about. The building fund transfers, that $268,000, that represents the beginning fund balance of the building fund. So last year was the year that the building fund made a lot of money. And so we reduced the cost for the building department. And then that now is being taken out of the general fund and it's going into the building fund. And so now all the resources that are coming in through the building department will be going into the building fund. So there'll be no more overlap. Previously, we had been carrying, we being the general fund, had been carrying the building department because it had not generated enough resources to cover its expenses, but that is not the case now. In fact, the building department's bringing in more money than property taxes. All right, so this also includes the general fund reserve. So my proposal is you start with 15% and you tick up to 25. I had a few conversations with people who have MBAs in public finance who do this for a living as budget officers, and my understanding is that 25% is a goal for general fund. The other advice I got was aim for something between 15 and 20 for utilities and 50% for the building fund because it's much more volatile. So those, I think the water fund, the water operating fund reserve and the building fund reserve, we should talk about over the next year, but I do think setting reserve funds for those would also be wise. And then we do have an unappropriated ending fund balance. You'll find when you do all the math, I was off by about $6,000. I'm going to change the unappropriated ending fund balance so that we end up matching expenditures to revenue. I was under, so I'm not over, but that happened when I made a final adjustment.
$10,950, it's reserved for council designated insurance.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Did that, now that has disappeared, or at least it's not titled that anymore. That's because we're of the reserves we're building. Or can you explain?
Sure. Yeah, I had a hard time with that one. And actually, Jerry Taylor was really helpful to me. And that was apparently a reserve that had just been kind of living there as if our health insurance rates went up. And he and I both agreed that that was probably not necessary anymore. We were able to account for health insurance increases, and we're not seeing the kind of increases that he saw back in those days. So he was also, comfortable with it going away.
Okay.
Because we will have a reserve too.
Okay, it explains it. Thank you.
Yeah. And you'll see, just so it's clear, that the reserve for park equipment used to live here, but because
It's moved.
I think it falls under the Civic Improvement Reserve, I'd rather use restricted money to pay for that than unrestricted money. So that's why I moved it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, on to the next. Get going. So, oh, and this is just unappropriated fund balance, save it for now. We need to have some policy discussions because we can't keep paying for all the things out of the general fund. But I think that that's not a decision I make. That's one that the council makes. Okay, so again, carryover balance. I know I've heard this a couple times. We have all this extra money, and I agree. It's very exciting. We're in a great position. It feels like, I don't know if any of you had kids or grandkids that watch this, but when Mr. McDuck would swim in his money, it's like, yeah, we have all this money. And it's like, well, let's not forget it was going down. And this is also a diagram of our savings. And so this just shows what our annual expenditures were. So the light blue line is what was budgeted and the blue line is what's actual. And just again, you can see the trend. We had a lot and now we have a lot less, even though we have a lot more money. And so it's just, that becomes that cycle will end up where we are with the water fund if we keep going in this direction. So I just think we have to have some real conversations about how we're spending a surplus. What is a surplus? In my mind, a surplus happens after a reserve is set. So just to kind of keep things clean, I didn't do any transfers, not even to Underhill this year, so that we can have these conversations and decide what to do next. The Civic Improvement Reserve, we spent some time talking about this, but again, professional services were for design or other services related to implementing civic projects. If the budget committee wants to see another number there, it will not hurt my feelings. We moved park equipment funding from non-department to this restricted fund because I believe it falls under the objectives of this fund. The road transfer, so this is again something I struggled with because this is what it's been in the past. The transfer did not actually occur for fiscal year 20. So there was the $60,000 transfer budgeted. Why it didn't happen, none of us were here and know, but it didn't. So in good faith, I'm proposing this, although it's not entirely necessary. We can talk about that when we get to the road fund. But it does provide funding that, because the road fund provides personnel, this resource could be done to carry over for another year. But funding the road fund is, it's just an ongoing issue. And then I just noted here, we should discuss the purpose and need of this fund over the next year and whether or not we continue to use it.
Are we going to talk about the timing for Dorcas or whatever else, or what needs to be done? And
Yeah, Dan will enlighten you further when he
Okay.
talks. And do we go until 6:30 or?
6.
Oh,
we go towards 6. Yeah.
Yikes. Okay.
But that's all right. We can stop wherever we are and start up again tomorrow. So
I wanted to get done today.
that was in the old days.
Why? Why does everything have to be so hard in the new days? Why? Gosh.
You made the budget so interesting. We're all engaged here. It's gonna take 2
Well, that's
days.
supposed to make it easier. Okay. Here we go. Okay, court. So we reduced the FTE. We got a new system, which you can see it's a little bit more expensive than it was last year. But that's allowed us to be more efficient, and it freed up about a 0.2 FTE. So that's where I was able to snake over Ashley into the administration. Fines are not keeping pace with the cost to run court. I think we're seeing that. The other thing that we're dealing with court is we're operating out of the Nehalem Bay Fire Department for the next 2 years. And I'm worried about wearing out our welcome. So just mentioning that. Any questions about this? Okay. Parks, I completely left this out of the hard copy of the budget. So here you go. I emailed it to you. It is also on the city's website. So I apologize for that. Doing too many things at once, I think. But we were able to reduce the FTE pretty significantly. You can see there's still a typo here. I will fix that. I apologize. And that's because we have moved that position over to the TLT fund. And then we've been paying for a lot of the tourist facilities for the supplies in many of those facilities. So we've also moved those costs. You can see janitorial supplies were 10,300 budgeted last year. We're budgeting about 1,000 for that. Okay. Move on then. Still do it. We can still get out of here. Okay. Oh, now I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Yeah, I'll try to start off by addressing, I believe it was Chip's question about the fines and forfeitures. I think it's a conservative number to be at the 30,000, but some of the past actuals that have been really high are from some of the major short-term rental citations that were issued and fines that were received that were in the 10, 20, 30 plus $1,000 range, is why some of those actuals were higher. But one of the big things, we're still writing the same amount of traffic citations on average, but the big, I guess, cut is something came up within the last year regarding where the actual city limits are. And it was determined that the actual city limits end at the western property boundaries of the houses along Ocean Road. So all the people that were camping along Ocean Road are technically outside the city limits. And so we stopped citing for camping inside the city limits, obviously, because it's outside the city limits. And those were $500 piece citations. And so that's the huge decline from citations will be from the projected camping and city limits citations that we normally write. Does that answer a question, Chip?
Sorry, yes. So is that just out of, this is not exactly on point, but is all of Ocean Road to Laneta County, not city?
Yes, from Laneta north, the described property boundary for the city limits ends at the western property of the homeowners. So it'd be the east side of Ocean Road would be the city limits along that road.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And go ahead to the next slide. So who we are, there's myself, which is over 19 years now, Officer Mike Sims, which is over 11 years, Officer John Garcia is over 8 years now, and Officer Sean Mooney is over 5.5 years, which officer retention is one of my biggest goals, is to keep who we have I think we have an excellent group here, and so officer retention is a huge goal of mine. And going along with that, just in general, we have a day shift and night shift guy. Those hours change, depends on the day of the week, but the hours between the time that the night shift guy goes off duty and the day shift guy comes on, which averages about 2,400 hours in a year, is the on-call time. Currently, we're at a $3 an hour compensation. And this year we are going to bump it up to a $6 an hour compensation. And in the budget in the past, I had budgeted to increase it in the previous years, but that number just was never increased. So it was just a small increase from what we've budgeted for in the past. I think we bumped it from $14,000 to $15,000 this year for the on-call pay to be able to cover that $6 an hour.
Can I ask a question, Chief? Could you describe to everybody what is on-call? I don't think everybody knows what that means.
So on-call is after they've gone off duty, they're at home. They can't really do anything except for be available to respond to a call if they get called out. We usually require they're on scene within 15 minutes of receiving the call if they're on call. So that means waking up, getting dressed, getting in your car and being on scene within 15 minutes. So it really restricts their ability to run to the store, go out to eat. Pretty much when you're on call, you're just available to respond if need be.
Thank you.
Our police contracts that we have include the city of Wheeler, which is 15 hours a month, breaks down to about 30 minutes a day. City of Nehalem, 20 hours a month, breaks down to about 40 minutes a day. And then the state parks, which is about 250 hours a year. And they break it down to wanting 7 hours a week in the summer months and 4 hours a week in the off season. The average cost of an officer for next budget year, including the benefits, comes out to be approximately $70.56 an hour. Currently, the contract with the city of Wheeler comes out to be a rate of $71 an hour that we're charging them. The city of Nehalem comes out to be a $78 an hour charge, and Oregon State Parks is at $110 an hour charge. The city of Wheeler, their contract should be renegotiated at the next budget year. So starting in January, we'll probably start renegotiating that to up the cost to give us more of a cushion in covering fuel and vehicle maintenance type items that might arise from being part of their contract.
This is Chip.
Yeah.
I think you answered my question, which is there is no overhead charge.
Correct. That the $70 is just the $0.56 is straight salary and benefits. And the vehicle fuel maintenance, all that kind of is not factored into that $70.56 cost.
And not only the fuel and maintenance, but the administrative overhead costs. So there's an opportunity, Layla.
Speaking my language.
Yes. And so the one of the things I want to promote and keep encouraging is that officers get additional training and attend college classes. The Department of Public Safety standard training is what certifies police officers for the state of Oregon, and they offer different levels of certifications. There's the basic certification that you get when you complete the academy and field training. And then with a combination of training, education, and years of experience, you can obtain an intermediate certification and then an advanced police certification. The specific trainings that they require to get those different certifications involve communications training, advanced technical trainings, leadership trainings, and risk management trainings. And so a lot of our training budget goes towards achieving certain classes to be able to allow the officers to get higher levels of certification through BPSST. Then they offer the supervisory certifications, and there's 3 of them that they offer, which is the supervisory, the management, and then the executive certificate. The minimum hours that they require for training are every year we have to do 8 hours of use of force training and an hour of ethics. There's also a 2-year, or you have to always be certified in CPR, which is a 2-year certification. In a 3-year period, they require 84 hours of total training, which includes the annual training. And they add 3 hours have to be crisis intervention training and mental health training. And then if you have a leadership type certification, they also throw in that you have to have 24 hours training that's related to specific on leadership. So those are the basic trainings that we have to provide for the officers every year and within every 3 years.
Eric, are a lot of these training modules available online?
Since COVID, they've offered a lot more.
Mhm.
There's been several leadership classes that actually myself and Officer Sims just completed, I think 32 hours worth of online trainings in the last month, specific to leadership that is new because of probably driven by COVID. But like most of the use of force classes have to be in person. There's still several classes that have to be done in person still.
Do those get done by county where everybody shows up at the sheriff's office, or where do they do
So
those?
in our in Tillamook County, all the agencies in the county kind of have a monthly training that's set up, so we can share instructors and resources. And we do firearms training in Tillamook, and a lot of the use of force training is put on in Tillamook with Tillamook City or Tillamook County.
Thank you.
Eric,
Yes.
you're getting all that training for $9,500.
No, so the whole line item. So for that line item includes continuing education classes and lodging. So there are conferences that we go to, and which will require lodging. Some are in Portland, some are in Bend. So that goes into part of that travel and training. But most online classes are, I think the leadership class that we just took was a $200 class. And then also we have in the line item our policy manual that we pay for through Lexipol, which is adopted by, I think, most police agencies in not only Oregon, but it's getting to be close to nationwide. Offer a daily training bulletin portion of that where there's a daily question that is on an app they have, and it's geared directly towards the policy. So so that is part of the training of the policies and being able to go back and show that the officers have read and understood the policies. Also in the travel and training budget, we have the training ammunition cost for the firearms range, and ammunition has gone up tremendously in the last few years. So that's part of that travel and training budget.
Well, I just think you're getting the city's getting one hell of a bargain for $9,500.
We do have a lot of training to do, and we, as you'll see actually in the actuals, the last, I think it was 2 years ago, I'll have to look back, but we were very, very low on travel and training because COVID shut it down, and we weren't attending any of the conferences, and it was very limited training that year. But now that COVID's over, well, the main push of the pandemic is over, where we can actually attend conferences now. Hopefully we can catch up on some of that training that was laxed a few years ago. And to go on to what we have. So I have all certificates that they offer at this point. And then the police officers all currently have intermediate certifications, and 2 of the 3 can obtain their advanced certifications by the end of the year. It depends on college credits and the actual specific trainings that they obtain, but 2 more of them could have their advance by the end of the year. And just major differences from this year. There's not much. It's pretty similar to every other year in the budget, but is that your computer there or mine? The battery running low? Must have been mine. I'll hurry up so my computer doesn't die here.
I just plugged mine in.
Did you have a notice or did I?
No, it's you. Better
Okay.
hurry.
Give me a second.
I'll talk about your community outreach if you want.
You can start on that real quick because it was plugged in, so it shouldn't be dying. Give me a second.
I planted something in his slide.
Okay. Yeah, I'm back. That we did purchase this year. We just now purchased a drone that we'll be able to use in search and rescue, taking aerial photographs of crime scenes, vehicle crashes, and other things that we need aerial photographs of. The only thing is that to be able to fly the drone, we need to first complete the FAA course for drone, being a pilot for a drone. So we'll have to send whoever's interested on the department on flying the drone to a class and be able to take the test. And we plan on purchasing another patrol car this year, which will be the third one out of the 4, and we're on the 7-year replacement schedule. And then fuel, I left it high because, as you all know, it's just, we don't know when it's going to stop, and it's already gone up $1 since I created my budget. So it's just an unknown, so I left it at a high number. And the future this year, community outreach activities that we're planning on doing is working with EVC CERT by participating in their trainings. We're going to increase the bicycle patrol again this summer, and Saturdays will probably be a common day to use it because schedules overlap that day and allows an officer to be more free to ride the bicycle around town. And continue presentations local elementary school, and then have random informal copy with cop meetings. And of course, whatever else the city manager comes up with for us to do as community outreach.
You're a good sport, Eric.
Yes. Continue. And here's the budget. If you have any questions, specific questions, I'll try to answer them.
Well, I'm glad we have police officers that we can look at and say, hey, that's John, that's Sean, that's Eric, whatever. So appreciate the response you guys are able to provide. So.
And then the reserve fund for equipment. We're putting in the 26,200 as we have for a long time now, over 10 years, I know of, into that fund. Projections in the future, I think in the next probably 15 years, we might be starting to go negative in that fund with the increased cost of everything. And so I think we're going to look at next year if we need to increase it just a minor amount now, so we don't have to make a big increase in 10 years or so. But we're planning on buying the one car, which I increased to $50,000 from $48,000 last year. And I'm confident that that number will still be good, even though I can't even get a price of a car yet. They haven't released the new cost for the next year models yet. The dealership didn't even know when they'll be able to get that information. They're hoping to get it in June, but the 50,000 should be still plenty to be able to make it within that cost.
You're going to have a real challenge trying to get delivery on a car in this environment.
Last year it was tough, but we got it ordered early enough that we were able to get it last year. How
many miles do you put on an average car per year?
The the hours are a lot more than the miles.
Mhm.
Usually when we go to replace them, they're in the 90 to 100,000 mile range.
No, for 7 years, that ain't bad. Mhm.
Yeah, but they run for 8 to 10 hours a day. So a lot of idling and slow hours on them.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks, Eric. Unless there's other questions, that concludes the general fund portion of this presentation. There's no more discussion. I can hand it over to Dan to talk through the enterprise funds. And I think that's about probably what we'll get through today. You guys don't want to stay till 9? Just knock this thing out?
You're still young.
Not that young.
Don't test me.
All right, Dan, take it away.
All right. So I just lost my actual screen, so I'm gonna drag it back. So give me 1 second. Where did the PowerPoint go? There we go. Not sure why it did that to me. Okay. So I wanted to talk about our staff, because staffing, just like Eric said, staffing is important. And this year, I really do have an awesome, outstanding team. So wanted to introduce Lori, who's our utility clerk. She oversees everything from water billing to the cross connections, data entry, sending out notices saying, hey, it's time to check that device, things like that. She also now manages the timesheets and fuel sheets, and she has provided me with a ton of the clerical support, essentially, that I needed to loosen up a few things, so I had a little bit more time to work on projects. So the other people, which are a lot of these guys are new, you'll notice the starting dates on some of these folks. Jeremy Jepson, he's one of our utility workers. Our utility workers are a jack of all trade. And so we have to do everything from landscaping to building construction to working on water services, everything. And so Jeremy has been with us. He started in June of 2021. He came over from the phone company, so he had a good background in utility work and such. He's been a great asset to the team. Next slide. Another new face to us is Mike Grimes. Mike also came over from the phone company. Yes, we pilfered the RTI team pretty bad. So Mike has been with us since February 2021. Just like Jeremy, he's been an outstanding employee. He's been a great asset. He's been learning really quickly about the water utility work. They're doing water taps and things and stuff by themselves. So instead of having to do a lot of really overseeing of them in the field, I've really been able to essentially start them off and then let them work on different things. But a big piece of that, next slide, please, is Jason. And she found my picture for Jason. So many of you guys probably seen Jason around town. Jason's been with us since June of 2019. He started off essentially taking care of the restrooms, things like that, and then moved up into full-time with the city and has been working as a utility worker. So Jason right now, he's been helping teach the guys. He's been an excellent instructor. He's been excellent working with the guys and stuff. He is waiting on being able to take his water certification test. I feel bad for him. He's been sitting on the list for about 3 months now. And unfortunately, because of all the COVID and funding, the state has not got to him to allow him to take a test yet. They said hopefully soon. But Jason, I wanted to point him out to you. He's been great. You'll see him out and about. So if you see him, tell him hi. Next slide. The other person, another one of those people that works behind the scenes, John Helzer. He's been with us since 2021. He's a utility worker. He's now taken out of the TLT funds. John is the person that's been out there keeping the bathrooms clean, making sure the doggy stations are all well kept, emptying the trash cans along Lanita Avenue. And he's always got a smile on his face. He's been an outstanding also employee to the city. He really keeps things cleaned up. He's been great with that. We used to get complaints here and there. I haven't, since John's been with us, we haven't got a complaint one so far about any of the restrooms or doggy stations. So that was pretty much our team. So some highlights. I like to look at the past a little bit as it shows what our future holds. Some of the questions came up a while back. We were looking at surplusing our Jeep and our Ranger on the Oregon State surplus versus just doing it locally. The Jeep Patriot brought in $8,922.50 to the city, and that was after the state's cut, which is about $1,200 for doing all the DMV work, all the advertisement, the auction, and everything. I was blown away when I saw that we got $8,922.50 for that vehicle. The old Ranger, we also got $5,500 for that one, 81 cents or $55.81.75. So we did really, really good on our surplus of materials. So now purchasing through the Oregon State surplus, this year we've picked up a F-450 dump truck that's a diesel. It's called the Dumpkin. You'll hear the guys refer to it as that. It's an ODOT rig. It had about 120,000 miles on a diesel engine, which is just breaking that motor in, which is nice. It's been a great asset. This truck is not a daily driver like our other utility trucks are. This one is strictly for hauling our bigger trailers and working as a dump truck. The other thing we picked up was a 2010 Kubota. It's what we're using to take care of the fields like around Underhill Plaza. And we got a flail mower for it to be able to also bebop around town and flail the brush back and things like that. We still have our flail for our mini excavator, but the Kubota is able to move around town a lot better. So some other highlights, plans and documents for Dorcas Avenue. I know you asked about those, Dave, are at 95% ready to bid. So they'll go to they go to 100% right when we go to the bid process. So we're sitting on them and waiting. Why we're waiting on them? One, we budgeted this current budget year, we were budgeted at about 1.4. Cost of materials and everything has driven the price up to 1.6 million. And so we wanted to carry over the funds and actually budget in this coming budget year. We're also budgeting, or putting it off that we can shoot for the fall to start project, actually do the work. That's when contractors get a little bit more hungry for jobs during the fall and winter times. So this will be like a lot of the other previous projects. We start them in the fall, we finish them in the spring, right before typically the 4th of July era. This one should be probably done right about late to mid-June is my guess. So a couple other things. We completed the feasibility study on the water storage improvements. This is the replacement of the water tanks. This was a grant that we received that was what's that? So this was the 75-25 grant we did through FEMA. It's completed. The report will be released to the public and everybody here probably in the coming week. So grant funds in this budget year, as far as getting those funds back. So essentially we have the $75,000 from FEMA. And then we also had $20,000 that's been sitting out there in the state that's supposed to be returned to us from a SIP grant, which was part of the chlorine study for the well site, and the other part of it was for the emergency well. We have not seen those funds. The state is running about a year behind on returning the grant funds. So they are budgeted in this coming year. You'll see them under the water under grant. So if you see that 90,000, that's what it is. So the other thing that's been pretty popular this year, water connections. We have done 31 so far for Manzanita this budget year. Typically we do about 10 to 12 water meter installs. And so I would guess before July 1, we probably will be getting pretty close to the 40 mark. So since I wrote this thing, we put in 2 more meters just today. So, and then the weather of the coast, we've seen a little bit of snow. We've seen lots of rain this late spring. So that's been kind of the thing for Public Works, is just bouncing around chasing things. So one of the newest things, that I've been handling and working with mini groups, the Nehalem Bay EVC, the MRC, the CERT, the PWAT guys. and gals is emergency preparedness. And this year has been exceptionally well for what we've been doing. You heard that we've spent roughly about, I think we're about $5,000-$6,000 we've spent so far. And that money has gone a long, long way. One of the things we picked up was a military field kitchen, which was designed to service 250 military service members 3 times a day. So this thing comes with a huge grill, ovens, soup kettles, I mean, everything. And so it literally, through bouncing from one person to the next, the city was able to pick this up for literally the cost of me sending one of my guys down to Coos Bay twice to pick up the whole thing, because there was that much stuff that our diesel dump truck and a trailer couldn't haul it all back. All the equipment is brand new in excellent shape. So you want to bounce to the next slide, please? So other things we've been doing, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, we have a radio trailer. It's designed to work as for communications, for ham radio, things like that. We have an HF radio system that's in a box. These are called go boxes for us on the radio side, or radio in a box. We built these setups, and they've gone through essentially the different people looking at them. But what these do is allow for communication, not just within our area, but outside our area. And it lets us actually transfer information like simple emails back and forth between different areas, like for medical and command and things. So another big highlight, this was just recently, we picked up a water filtration unit. A while back, I don't know if some of you guys might remember, we picked up a water filtration package system from the Oregon State Surplus. It turned out to be a dud, and they reimbursed us most of our money back. We came out ahead of the deal with a little Connex box and some other stuff. But this water setup was complete, and it's in excellent shape. Previous water operator, that's part of the PWAT, John Handler, myself, we looked over all the bits and pieces of this one. It was in great, great shape. It cost us $2,500. This system is a desalination system, so we can pretty much take any water, brackish to salt water, and filter it. But unfortunately, it does have a very, very slow production rate of about 2.5 gallons per minute. So we are still working on our water trailer, which is a water treatment distribution trailer. And that is going for a goal of 50 gallons a minute and can be utilized in a whole different types of scenarios. So the water operating fund, I'm going to jump on my other screen here. So the water operating fund resources. So you'll notice one of the things is wholesale water sales is not been proposed this year. It's wrapped into the actual water sales and collection. Our billing system pulls it in. This wholesale water collections is for Zadoc Creek and Tideland, and then we do have some funding that comes from Wheeler through an intergovernment agreement. The funds, though, that we do get from Zadoc Creek and Tideland are split between the two cities. So it helps pay part of both our water bills. And then what's the remainder of the bill is what Wheeler pays for. And that's all based on two things: actual usage of water and EDUs, which are equivalent dwelling units. And roughly this is starting to shift. We're looking at about an 86 to 14% ratio than what we've seen in the past, which is 85. So more houses we're building in Manzanita, the more percentage we'll end up paying in the system. But it also means we get a little bit more of the cut of the funds that come from Zadoc Creek and Tideland. The other large water system, that we supply water to, is Nehalem Bay State Park. That, I want to make sure everybody's clear, is not part of the cut between Zadoc Creek and Tideland. So Nehalem Bay State Park is literally a customer of the city of Manzanita. So the other thing was just that grants that you've seen on there. That was the carryover from, like I said, the 2 grants that we'll be receiving funds for, hopefully in this coming year. So water operating funds, you'll notice as far as salary and wages, Layla explained those and stuff. One thing I'll touch is on the on-call, just like the police department, the public works was really, really underpaying essentially for folks to have the same requirements. They had to be out to the site within 20 minutes, and that means they have to come up here, get their work truck, go to a scene and a water main break. Water main breaks can be minor or they can be catastrophic. Recently we had a catastrophic, and it was an eye-opener for everybody again to see that public work guys have to get there real fast, get the water shut down. So with that being said, our guys were making right around the $1 an hour for being on call. Under the new on-call proposed, they will get bumped to $3 an hour for being on call. The other things, building operations, I think most everything in here is the same. The only other thing you'll notice is a jump in is the billing and administrative costs. This is once again a software, cost of software, the water billing software. We are also have a system we're working towards that is allowing for customers to be able to portal in and actually see their water bill, see their usage per day, get information. And essentially it also will be a smart system is what we're working towards, where if there's a possible water leak, the water system, us, would be notified, and the homeowner, they would receive a message saying, hey, you possibly have a leak. So the idea, deterrent to one, lose water, and two, to cut costs on damaging homes. So the next part, capital outlay, most everything in there is still the same. So well filled and transmission lines. So there's not a lot going on out there, mainly because everything is working good. We're going to be doing one small minor little project that's just a couple of $1,000s hopefully out there, but all in all, the well system's going good. The CO2 stripping tower, I know a lot of people keep asking about that. Still doing its job to this day. We still have not had to add any caustic soda to the water.
How are we fixed for capacity with we got 3 wells, right?
Well, actually, Dave, we have 2, but
okay.
So imagine having a motor with a turbo. We haven't even started using the turbo yet. So when we did the CO2 project, I thought it'd be a good time because we were going to have to replace pumps to go ahead and up our capacity. And so our well system can pump 750 gallons a minute. And with that being said, that system is only running at 500 gallons a minute because I really don't see a need for us to go over the 500 gallons a minute. So I keep it essentially throttled back. Pump wise, I have heard some concerns that that we're not able to keep up with capacity, and honestly, that's not the thing. Our system right now is well running. It is off in an off mode way more than it's on the on mode. And in the winter months, we actually run into not horrible problems, but I don't like we go out and have to flush water because we're not using enough water. So because we have so much capacity on our system.
What are the plans for the future tanks?
So we will
size,
the size. Well, what we're looking at is twin 1 million gallon tanks. And the reason for that is one is the system up there is overcomplicated. It makes it difficult to bring a tank offline to do maintenance or anything on it. And so what's up there now is equivalent to is 2.15. So we're going to have a little bit of a reduction. And both the engineers that I've talked with, the one that's doing the report, and Kyle, I've talked with him, is they both, they all agree that, hey, we have a little bit too much water storage. And so even with the growth of the city and the projected future, we're not growing enough to go over that amount of capacity. We keep a huge amount of water reserve for firefighting, and I mean a huge amount. And so our normal usage, by the time the pumps turn on, we have used about 80,000 gallons of water out of the reservoir and out of the 1.6, and then the pumps come on and fill that up within about 6-7 hours. So lots of water there.
Do you ever exercise that intertie between Neocani and Manzanita?
No, we have not exercised that.
Okay.
The reason being is that was put in prior to me, and it was engineered as far as the construction of it, but not engineered as far as how the hydraulics will work. And Manzanita hasn't had any type of need, essentially for that. I know that their elevation on their reservoirs are much, much higher than ours. So they would have no problem pushing water to us, Dave. But going the other way around, I don't know how it would work. They are actually working with an engineer to find out, because as you know, this last summer, they had the sandwich board up saying, hey, you need to conserve water. So there has been talk of trying to work that intertie, and they have been in touch with an engineer.
Mhm. I remember probably 25 years ago that Manzanita needed water from Neoconi, and so what they did is hook a fire hose from a fire plug down at Neoconi Cove and one up on University Avenue. Opened both ports, and the water went right up the hill. So because
we also had a fire engine that same year, or during that same time, up in the woods trying to bypass our water main. There was a large land movement that crippled the surface line.
Yeah.
So
water everywhere. So thank you, Dan.
Yep. So water construction fund, not a lot to report there, other than you will notice the water construction project greatly increased. As of everything, building materials, water materials have gone through the roof and are becoming very difficult to find. A simple homeowner's valve for us, I've had 30 of them on order for over 2 months, and we still have not yet seen them. I did throughout the last several years create quite a bit of backup supplies, and we're eating into those backup supplies pretty heavily, just waiting to get stuff that's been on order. So, but the water construction fund, the majority of the cost that was increased on that was the road asphalt costs, and then the piping, the water piping and such.
So when we do the Dorcas thing, is it going to be the kind of thing where you open the road, everybody gets in there, the phone company, the sewer people, the water and road, so forth, the drains?
Yeah, so I'm not what I call, and no bad, but I don't call it I call it the Portland version. Watched in front of my grandma's house, where in 5 years they cut the road 3 different times. So when we do a road reconstruction project, everybody is notified and invited. We send out notices to the power company. We try to encourage them to go underground. They most of the time do not do anything with it. Wastewater, their stuff is in the ground, and the way they have technology now, they don't have to come out of the ground for anything. They can do a slip liner through. They're a lot cheaper than replacing the old line that's buried, 8-10 feet down. Phone company historically has jumped into the project with us. They'll run duct and stuff along with our storms and things. So they're also always invited, but as a city on this project, we're replacing everything. We're replacing the water mains, the service lines, and we're installing storm, and we're redoing the road base. So most of our roads don't have any base. That's why they have all the funny lumpiness to them, or they have a base that's unsupported. So there was no type of geofabric or anything, and the rock travels down through the sand. So it's do it all at once and do it right type of project.
Is it going to be the whole length of Dorcas?
Yes, it actually will go from Classic all the way to 4th, down 4th to a Edmond right away, and then we have to go through the Edmond right away to tie into 3rd Street storm drain system.
Cool.
We'll have Dan do an update on the Dorcas project, probably not next month, but the month after.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So a couple of the other things, my goals, and budget items that are in here. So one of the things is revenue. We were looking at the shortfalls. Layla has been like totally awesome about saying, hey, Dan, we need to fix your budgeting for funds coming in to be able to build infrastructure. So one of the things we're doing is we are internally looking at our fees, and these include fees for driveways, everything. OAW, who did the city's last water rate study, is going to be doing an update to that study. They are literally waiting on this budget because the budget helps set what the fees and structures and stuff are going to be. So another big piece, the storm drain SDC. Our SDCs, when it comes to storm drain system, are heinously bad, along with our parks, but we're taking on the stormwater one first. And so we'll see a great increase, and where that will play out is in new construction. And so they'll help pay for essentially the new sewer or storm sewer going in, which has been paid for historically by the general fund. And so that's one of the things Layla wants to get away from, and I completely agree with her. So part of this, though, is we also need to know what we have. I've been asked, well, how many feet of asbestos pipe do we have, Dan? And how many feet of regular pipe do we have? How many water valves do we have? And honestly, I can't tell you because none of that data was kept. But we have a GIS system, which is a global information system, and it helps out that Layla is a GIS like guru, and she's been helping on this program. And so by the end of this summer, I actually want to have all of our water mains in our system, all of our service and valves. So when I get asked, hey, Dan, what's our water system worth? I can give you an actual number. And this is huge in order to complete a CIP program. So other things coming up, we are going to be working with the engineer again on the next phase of the reservoir replacement. You'll notice there was no budgeted funds for this grant we're going to be applying for, because it takes almost a full year to be even awarded the information or the grant. And so we figure if we're working on it this later summer into fall, we'll be looking at next budget year for the actual numbers to be able to put in. I'm looking at replacing our 2010 Ford Ranger. Once again, I'll be going to Oregon State Surplus. We'll be looking for an F-250, preferably an F-350 one-ton that can haul the heavy trailers and things like that around. The Rangers were good rigs, but they're just too small for doing public works type of work. So another thing that was in the system maintenance is a replacement for treatment plant pumps. This is essentially a rollover from last year. We through everything else going on, we just didn't get to them. But this year we've gotten some numbers, and we're looking at having those pumps rebuilt and replaced. And then one of the biggest things that I think is going to be huge when we get to the finish line on it is continuing to upgrade the water meter system once again, so we can track that water usage and alert for possible leaks and be able to help homeowners out. You'll be able to even see out what your sprinkler's using. So couple of snow events that I've been through here at the city. We have to put sand on the road. Well, the sand, because we live at the coast, it gets wet, and then it freezes as chunks, and it doesn't spread when it's in big, large chunks. So we're looking at just their cheap metal, essentially like a carport cover that'll keep the main part of the rain off of our sand for roads. So, and this is coming out of building maintenance. Dorcas Lane replacement. Once again, this has jumped up to 1.6 million. It'll replace everything, street base and all. And once again, I'm shooting for fall of 2022. We will probably start the bid process. My guess would be somewhere around August, September, right in there. So that way we can get started around October 1. So another piece to be done is our city park. The city park is starting to show its age. I have to give hats off to many community members, including Mary Brophy, that was able to bring us the play structures that are currently there, but they have been worn out. They're starting to lose their paint. They're starting to get some rust on them. So we had this in the last budget, but due to COVID and time constraints, we just couldn't get to it. And when I say COVID, everybody likes to kind of blame some things on COVID, but really I'm one of those people, if somebody says pick a paint, Dan, I pick white. So I think it's super important to have community involvement with the play structure. And it was kind of hard to do that under the COVID rules. So the other thing, Layla, looked at the rules and said, hey, Dan, it's coming out of Civic improvement. So with the cost of metal and stuff going up, she bumped the numbers up to 40,000. So that'll be pretty cool. So you will hear more on this in the future to come. The old structure will be rehabilitated, and we hope to essentially place it maybe in a pocket park or somewhere else in the city at some point. So Public Works Equipment Reserve. This is a little different than several years back. You know, Jerry kind of talked about this, I think, several years. The vehicle right now, we have $36,000 set aside. We don't have, other than replacing the Ranger, we don't have anything really set forth. We get good chances with the Oregon State surplus, so it's an opportunistic ability to purchase vehicles, especially ones that we really could use, and the price on things are beyond, you know, believable when it comes to the equipment. So we have 36 there. That doesn't mean we're going to spend it, but it's there if something comes up that we could use and need.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate it. We're at the 6 o'clock point, and I've already been contacted by one of our members that he has to leave for another appointment. And we still have a number of pages to go through. But I would like to see what people feel about we adjourn for today and pick up again tomorrow, and to talk about the other pages here, then go back to hash out any other questions that pop up from the discussions we had today. And particularly, you know, the talk about timing for the water rate study and water rate increase and so forth. So anyway, how do you folks feel about that? I'm just one.
Works for me.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea to finish it up tomorrow. This is a lot of great information. There's no point in rushing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. Agree.
Okay. So, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up at this point? You know, the participants out there, you have anything you can't wait to mention? You know, the non-members, Gerald or Jim or Kelly or Leela.
Looks like no one has their hand raised.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same station, and keep going. I thank you very much for everybody to get involved in this. Thank you very much to Layla and all the staff for being able to answer the questions and for being able to put together all of this information and give us some idea of what we're looking at in the future, because there are so many things to play with, you know, particularly TLT or not TLT, and 1.5 million people going to either park on either side of us. So anybody have anything else you want to offer up? Okay, with that, we're going to adjourn. We'll pick up again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.